we should not see Russia as just this permanent arch rival on the world stage when there could be at least a degree of amenability to each other and in some way cooperation.
Do you think that Ukraine should join NATO?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not, because then it puts us in a pickle where there's going to be an unresolved border.
Well, no, I do not think that they should join NATO. It's only it's scaling up a conflict. It's expanding it rather than contracting it down.
Why do you think it's scaling up the conflict?
It's scaling up the conflict because it's crossing a red line that Russia has laid out for a long time.
I think NATO should honor the agreement that it made with Russia back in the 90s that they would not move any further to the east, and they keep doing that. And that has honestly triggered a lot of the aggression that we've seen.
Do you think that Putin's honoring those treaties, though?
No.
Putin honored his treaties for a good long while. As a matter of fact, he himself tried to enter NATO back in the 2000s, and he was rejected. There were times where he reached out. I mean, Russia was a strong partner, or would have been a strong partner in the global war on terror. Russia has been the victim of more terrorist attacks than just about anybody has since this war on terror began.
I think that we should support Ukraine. Obviously, this war is dragging on, but I think that we need to support Ukraine until there can be a negotiation reached. But for the time being, I support funding Ukraine.
I'm not a fan of what Russia did in Ukraine. I do not condone it whatsoever. I'm opposed to this bloodshed. But there were some real issues with the Donbass region, Luhansk, Donetsk, and essentially these regions were looking for representation in Kiev. And I just happen to believe that these accommodations could have been met had Minsk been adhered to, and I think peace could have prevailed.
I think the American people are feeling more and more disconnected from the war that every year that goes by in it. So I just don't think it's worth putting more resources and effort into a war that honestly nobody here personally cares about.
And it's really not going anywhere.
I do not consider Russia to be a geopolitical or even a civilizational foe of the United States or Britain. Well, just because of evidence, because since the Cold War ended, Russia has not, on an international scale, been an aggressor. It is someone who wants to assert their own sovereignty over their own people. And frankly, the United States and Britain should follow Russia's lead in wanting to benefit your own people, wanting for your own people to have peace and prosperity and sovereignty over their own land. And I mean that is ultimately a good thing. Do I think that the invasion of...
I mean, what's your thoughts on the fact that Putin was linked to bombing a children's hospital literally yesterday?
Well, I mean, maybe we could talk about the fact that Ukraine was linked to the massacre of Russians in the middle of a theater in Moscow. So,
I think a lot of people might disagree with you on that.
But people might disagree as well about who something that gets bombed. I mean, it's the middle of a war.
I'm under no illusions. The Russians have done some terrible things. And I just think that a new leadership can change the kind of course that we're going at. And I don't want to get to a point where we find out Russia's red lines. I don't want Russia using tactical nuclear weapons and killing Ukrainians. I don't want it to happen. So I'm very firmly of the opinion that President Trump can reboot this simply because he has that realist understanding. He has some, I think, deeper understanding of how we can use Russia against China. And I think that if we give some carrots to Russia, in addition to some sticks, some behavior can change in Ukraine.
Donald Trump says that he has this plan to end the war in Ukraine. What do you think that plan entails?
I have no clue. I think trying to put an end to the war is probably the preferable outcome because I don't think it's a war that the Ukrainians can win. I am fully on the Ukrainian side. I just think that keeping this war going on endlessly is not the path to go down.
Do you think that Putin poses a threat to the U.S.?
I don't think at this point right now. I think our biggest threat is domestic.
I would say our biggest threat is China.
I think the Russians have an agenda, which is to continue their campaign. They have an agenda to protect Russian speakers. They have an agenda to, acquire their various resources. There's an agenda on their end to absolutely continue the balance of power in the region. It's going to be tough. Any American negotiator that talks to the Russians are going to run into these problems. But I have confidence in President Trump simply because he's a realist. And for him, his understanding is China is the greater enemy. And that the Russians, though, are a problem for American security interests, they may be necessary in the future as an ally or partner against the Chinese. And there are Russian interests that do not want this hostility with the United States.
We've seen Russian disinformation getting involved with Brexit, elections, even recently with the French election, we've heard about Russian disinformation being inseminated into that. Do you not think that potentially Russia will never have that amicable relationship that you're discussing?
Russian disinformation is more the product of the United States State Department and the intelligence community and their sort of aligned institutions in big tech and in the media and whatnot than anything that Russia has ever done. Russia might have some trolls that they can put out there, but the damage that our own institutions in the West have done to themselves and have perpetrated upon their own citizens, who they have a responsibility to tell the truth to. That's the first rule of journalism, and frankly, the first rule of government is to be honest and to tell the truth to your own citizens. To have the Hunter Biden laptop story be called Russian disinformation by experts in the field, experts saying that this is Russian disinformation, and it's all proven to be true, and they suppressed it in the press, and they censored it on social media. That's called disinformation. So what else out there is Russian disinformation?
Project Infection? Project Infection? One of the first known cases of Russian disinformation.
I'm not sure what Project Infection is.